And welcome to all of you who are braving this final day of sessions. We are committed to delivering a strong finish to the conference, so again, thank you. And my name is Catherine Melquist. I am the president of the Mobile Satellite Users Association. MSUA has been in existence for 25 years. Our focus is on mobility market development and mobility innovation. IoT is a core focus for our members and our user audiences. So we have a robust team of speakers. 3 of them are MSUA members, just saying. And each one of them is truly experienced in this field. They have very sharp perspectives and are very thoughtful. So really looking forward to this morning's discussion. Today's a briefing versus a full panel, so we want to jump right into our conversation. And I'll go ahead and introduce each one of you, and if you can take 2 to 3 minutes to summarize your company's vision for the IoT market. So beginning with Tim Last, VP and General Manager of IoT for Iridium.
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? I think I can see a few people out there. My name's Tim. I'm responsible for Iridium's IoT business, which 6 or 7 years ago we used to call it M2M, and 10 years before that we called data, and it probably didn't exist 20 years ago, but it's become, for Iridium, our fastest growing piece of our business. So I think it's a really interesting and exciting thing to do and place to be at the moment. And even in the context of satellite, which is a small piece of the global IoT sort of growth that's going on, there's still tremendous opportunity. In terms of what our vision is, or what we believe our role is, Iridium's a global satellite operator. We provide 100% coverage around the world with our mobile satellite network. And we believe our role is really to enable the connectivity between critical assets, businesses, people, governments, and particularly support that exchange of data that is now sort of termed IoT. And that's really about making sure that people get additional value from the businesses they're running, the products they're building, and keeping connected with those things on a global basis. We play a very specific role. We don't try to create all the solutions. We don't try to have control of the entire value chain in that business. What we try to do is to provide the best network solution and connectivity. So that's Iridium.
Perfect, thank you. And then we have Gregory Ewert from Intelsat, in charge of corporate strategy and business development.
Good morning, everyone. From our perspective, Intelsat has mainly been an FSS provider. So when we approach the M2M IoT world right now, we're looking at it from a network opportunity from our standpoint. And under that housing of mobility. When you look across our asset base that we have right now, we're utilizing mainly the EPIC system and our One system, which is a robust ground infrastructure that's in place for mobility. And when you think about mobility, it can be a train, it can be a boat, it can be vehicles on the ground. So we're looking at a holistic from that standpoint. There's another real important area that we're kind of looking at from a network-to-network standpoint, and that is also on ground-based. We're finding ourselves talking less about satellite and more about what we can do as an integrator from the standpoint of connectivity. At the end of the day, customers are looking for connectivity wherever they can get it. No different if they're at a Starbucks, or if they're in an airplane, or if they're in a boat, or if they're in their vehicle. We have a significant asset base of spectrum holdings also that we're utilizing either ourselves or through partnerships on ground base. So you'll hear us talking more about in the coming years about us as being a network of networks provider, but not only satellite based but also ground based, and fusing those together.
Perfect, Greg, thank you. And now we have Dr. Paul Struhsaker, CTO of Carnegie Labs.
Thank you. Most of you probably have not heard about Carnegie Labs or Carnegie Technologies. We are new entrants into the satellite space. Satellite is one of 3 major practices we have. Our first practice is about seamless connectivity. It's seamlessly handing off Wi-Fi and over to cellular and back, and also over to satellite. So it allows any of your phones to become a sat phone by its connectivity, but all your features and messaging transfers, and that's somewhat important when we talk about IoT in a second. Our second major vertical is IoT. We're in oil and gas, we're in mining and agriculture, and to a lesser extent, we're in construction, large sites in different places. Asset tracking, gates, all the things that put it together. Again, we use applications. It's end-to-end. It has an analytics side, and away we go. And then that falls into our satellite practice. We build end-user terminals and then applications to make those things be very seamless and easy to use for consumers and small to medium business. And believe it or not, all three of these technologies come together to be very important. As we've gone out to do IoT, the largest issue that all of the people we face is nobody has a system integration team, but they have a problem that needs to be solved. And that problem, for the cost that you solve it, has to solve the economic problem of paying for itself and actually providing a value to the customer. So we have an approach with respect to IoT that layers it. I agree with my friend at Intel here. In some cases, it's a network of networks. In some cases, like if you use Iridium, for example, it will be a direct connection to whatever it is, and it will actually be an integrated satellite modem. In some cases, depending on the asset and its value, it's going to be some near-term things for when it's in a building, NB-IoT and Cat-M, cellular when you're kind of in a nation, and then the moment it hits the dock and heads out to sea, it's going to be over satellite. And there are a number of things that are very expensive that are worth having that kind of technology at. So the takeaway for us at Carnegie and what our focus is, it's really solving the economic problems of our customers and providing them a turnkey solution. That's what we bring to the table.
Perfect, thank you. Alvaro Sanchez he's the president of Integrasys.
Hello, everybody. Thanks a lot, Silvana, for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be here again this year. Last time we were here with Paul as well. And our work is mainly software. We are a software company, very, very focused on satellite. So why are we here at IoT? Because in order to be satellite, a solution that IoT will adopt, it needs to be easy. It needs to be a way to connect a lot of links. Nowadays, it's not cost effective. First, it's not simple enough. So our work is going in that direction, making satellite simple, making satellite fast, quickly to access new large number of devices. We have another view, a little smaller view. Maybe we are a believer that IoT is not the greatest opportunity. It is some opportunity, but we will not call satellite the new IoT industry. It will be just a piece of the applications that we will tackle, but absolutely, we are a user of IoT. We gather many information in order to build our systems in automation, and we are also providers of software to enable IoT too. So, pleasure being here.
Thank you so much. And our final panelist is Paul Scardino. He is the Senior Vice President of Engineering and Marketing at Globecomm. In truth, his title is longer than this. I always tease him about this. I have to truncate it. But we are glad to have you here. And Paul, go ahead and if you can talk about Globecomm.
Thank you, Catherine. So first, I want to apologize. The lights are a little bright here. Forgive me for the glare off the forehead. And also forgive the New York speech impediment. Globecomm is an end-to-end system integrator, managed service provider. Similar to Carnegie Labs, we provide value for our end customers. One of the things that we do when I say end-to-end is we like to define IoT as, people use the term DNA for devices, networks, and applications. So from the device end, it's all the sensors, and we're talking about what Tim was talking about earlier. It's very low data rate information, but it can go all the way up to a sensor being a video camera, and the high throughput satellites that are coming out nowadays would support that high throughput of video that would be considered an IoT play. From the sensors, the connectivity is near field typically, or wired even, to the devices. The devices could connect to multiple technologies, as Paul was suggesting. One of them could be satellite, they could be cellular, any terrestrial means, and that connectivity would backhaul to a certain platform. Globecomm has a global IoT platform that's aggregating multiple satellites, like our colleagues here from Intelsat and Iridium, among many others. And it is also integrating cellular technology to be able to provide a single pane of glass platform connectivity for the customers. And finally, the last part about that is the applications. The applications that gather all the analytics, manage the data, and provide actionable items or actionable resources to either solve problems, create better efficiencies, or promote more profit for our customers. Now, one example I can one example that I could use is one of the major freight forwarders in the world is one of our customers, and besides tracking their sea containers that are on their boats in conjunction with our IoT partner AT&T, for AT&T, they provide the cellular communications globally, and they use us for the satellite communications. But in conjunction with them, they're tracking the sea containers so they can determine where the containers are, and they can monitor and control the temperature within those containers if there are perishable items in those containers. But we also are gathering data about the engine performance and the tides of the oceans, et cetera, to allow the company to save money on their fuel. And it's come out to tens of millions of dollars a year in savings by just tracking the information, lowering the revolutions of the engine, and monitoring the tides to determine when those ships are going to be due in port, and perhaps slow things down or speed things up accordingly. So, as I said, Globecomm's end-to-end provider. We're really a technology house. Many of the questions I've received this week are about our recent announcement of being acquired by Speedcast. So just to put that at ease, that's in the works, going through all the regulatory issues, and by the end of this year, we plan to have that finalized, and then Globecomm will be a part of Speedcast starting next year. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, great. So analysts are saying that by 2023, the Internet of Things market is going to be at about $8.9 trillion, the value of it. And that means 20 billion devices. They're also saying that 10% of that number is going to be devices that are off the grid. In other words, they are going to be for applications that are satellite appropriate. So staying in the satellite swim lane to begin with, let's talk about the verticals and applications that you think are best suited for a satellite-based IoT solution. And let's set connected a car aside to begin with. We'll come back to that. Tim?
Wouldn't you love to be an analyst, eh? I'm always amazed by the numbers and how they change each year, and how nobody ever goes backwards and looks at what the number was the last time they told us about it. But I think the point is IoT is just a massive explosion of sort of connectivity, the lowering of, not only data costs, but electronics, the cost to embed electronics into different products and services. That's really what's driving IoT and the growth. Saying 10% is off the grid or not connected through cellular means, it doesn't necessarily mean it's an opportunity for satellite, because we're a pretty small-scale industry in general terms. Therefore, our cost to embed our technology in these assets is not as low as many of these others. It's certainly not as low as cellular, and it's not as low as things like LoRa, Sigfox, and Wi-Fi and other technologies. But that all being said, it's a massive rising tide, and there's opportunity for satellite to play a role, whether it's providing, some kind of aggregation and backhaul for those remote types of technologies, or for direct-to-satellite connectivity to be made. I mean, you've seen the explosion of, small sat and nanosat investments, and I'm sure some of that's been discussed this week. That's happening because it's so much cheaper to get that technology not only in space, but onto those assets. Specifically, what type of verticals and applications? Well, in our world at Iridium, it's mainly sort of enterprise, industrial, governmental. We do have, some consumer type applications on our network, but clearly the nature of industries that need to have critical connectivity when they're not in cellular coverage really lends itself to industries. Everything from, tracking trains, trucks, aircraft, maritime IoT, as well as things in the sort of resources and utilities industry. So mining, water, agriculture. These are all industries that are really, in some cases at the very early days of penetration of IoT. Agriculture, for example, is only really now just starting to get a grip of what's possible to change their business model. So plenty of opportunity. That's the answer.
Okay. Avera?
I think that there is a huge demand from consumer. So the consumers are driving a huge IoT demand, but satellite will not be addressable for those consumers in a big manner. It will be mainly professional applications, enterprise, oil and gas, critical information that needs to be addressed and needs to be received and transmitted. That's where satellite plays a big role, as well as globally in that regard, very remote areas. Today's satellite is the last resource to use. And in IoT, it will be similar stuff. But we need to change that and try to bring it to the mainstream. And for that, we need to address better cost per sensor. In this case, it's sensors. But what happened, that for satellite is not normally connecting one sensor. We have customers that they bring and gather a lot of sensors and use one satellite terminal, which it makes it cost affordable. But the thing is that one satellite terminal for many sensors is not such a great opportunity that we sometimes talk about. So, yeah.
Great.
So from a Globecomm perspective, I've already given you the example of maritime industry. That's certainly one of our main priorities, and we are going to have campaigns pursuing the maritime industry. But certainly the other industry is heavy machinery. Tracking, as Tim had mentioned earlier, is very big. There are huge companies like Halliburton, for example, that have assets all over the world. They need global connectivity, they need tracking, and they're typically in areas that are off the grid. So satellite will certainly be a play in that scenario. And in the mining scenario, again, there are assets in the field. The most expensive thing in the field is always manpower. And in order to save expenses, one of the things people are doing is looking at remote control of all that equipment in the field. IoT is a big play there. So those are the three of the major markets that we're looking into in an IoT play.
Yeah, and I'd like to expand on that a little bit. We definitely believe that there's sort of a network of networks approach to this, mostly because of the cost of the sensor itself. In general, to be economically viable, that connectivity has to be extremely low. Many cases, sub $50 and under a penny a month to operate. But you aggregate that together, and it makes fantastic business for satellite usage, both in a store and forward sense or in a constant connectivity sense. There's a lot to be said for edge analytics, that you do a lot of the processing and pre-processing before it heads up and is returned, back to wherever it's going, and splitting the analytics up, and that helps reduce cost also. The big thing I think people keep on forgetting about all this is, in the end, I'll always come back to this. Everything has to be about the economics of it, and so when you create a solution for any of these industries, and I'll take O&G for example, there's opportunities, but you have to kind of tease them out. there were already a lot of sensors out in oil and gas fields, and a lot of them were, hardwired, but even those connections are basically aging and have to go away. That's a brownfield. There'll literally be a wave of technology overlay to kind of keep those assets going. You have to think through it. Now, how do I do it? How do I kit that? And how do I roll that out and make it turnkey? Because if the cost of putting all this stuff up is too complex, you fail even though you have low-cost devices. So you kind of have to take a look at the life cycle of IoT and then realize, hey, there's brownfield opportunities where I'm going to overlay new things. There's whole new things that we're going to be able to touch now that we have the satellite connectivity at the cost structure that we have that we could never touch before. And all of them are remote for the most part, right? Some of them aren't remote. There are a number of these things where satellite is a natural backup. Let's just take a look at the hurricane that just landed in Florida. And let's ask ourselves about just what would be going on there in the next few days. I think probably everybody has a part of their company that's doing something to send some form of communication disaster relief down there. And when you think of it that way, there's also a natural thing when you're doing B2B. There's a natural need that I need a backup communication source no matter what. And unfortunately, it probably doesn't have all the bandwidth of my terrestrial need. But if I use edge analytics, I can at least get the primary data I need to keep that value and to keep that asset coverage that we have, be it security, camera, whatever you have. So when you think about it, the opportunity, it could be 10%. But it's going to be 10% because it's layered in a lot of different ways. Some of them are, of course, remote, no connectivity. Others are absolute need for a third leg of connectivity because it's too important not to have that. So bear that in mind. It's a really rich area, which is why I love it. So,
yeah, and maybe to summarize, because I agree with everything. I think a common theme you've heard, there are two, and if we do want to be even bigger than that 10%, we are going to have to come to the table with a total cost of ownership model that allows the end user to understand that the devices that they're using have a payback for them. And one of the things that satellite has been notorious for not doing is being cost effective. We've got to make it upon ourselves to, standardize some of our technologies, move to, the leveraging off of traditional wireless, if it's from a chipset standpoint, 3GPP standards and things along that nature, I think are very, very important for us to do. The other thing that we're going to have to shift gears a little bit on too is thinking about the distribution channels and how we go to business. It might make more sense for us as a satellite industry, which is not, does not have large organizational structure from the standpoint of touching enterprise customers, to team up with, the likes of an AT&T, the likes of an Accenture, the likes of systems integrators out in the marketplace. I think if we can do all that, we can make sure that we hit that 10% and possibly get above 10% too.
Okay, we've got more to talk about there for sure, but let's shift to connected car. And what's it going to take to make that a possibility, and what is satellite's role, do you think?
Well, jump in on that one.
Yeah.
For starters, a lot of talk about connectivity in the auto industry and transportation industry from that standpoint. The car of the future is going to be a data center on wheels. The structure that we're seeing within the auto industry is moving from that of a manufacturing to a service-oriented company. So they've got to change their business model to become a mobility company. If you think about the data that's going to be coming on and off these vehicles, there's going to be terabits and terabits of data. This is going to be everything from LiDAR to radar systems. It's going to be vehicle-to-vehicle connectivity. It's going to be connectivity talking to X. That could be a street sign, a bicycle, et cetera. So there will be lots and lots of connectivity. The one thing, even when you start to look at 5G world, LTE, there's no one network that's going to be able to handle that insatiable appetite of data. From a satellite perspective, I think we've got to pick and choose our battles appropriately within that. Again, we will play a role in providing certain applications in the auto industry that make a lot of sense. What we like about it is that there is a model that's been blazed by others up here. Companies like Iridium have been doing, connectivity to heavy machinery for years and years. The auto industry is just another leap into more of a consumerist type device from that standpoint. A couple areas to think about. Broadcasting one-to-many is a very powerful tool that satellites bring that traditional networks don't. I think you're going to see that as one area where satellite can play, from updating of computer systems on board the car to the ECU to the TCUs, et cetera. In a real-time standpoint, one-to-many, the cost there over 5G or LTE is significant. The other areas, if we look at ourselves and our asset bases, we have other things that are very unique. GNSS augmentation, being able to use our networks in a way that provides security keys to vehicles. Cybersecurity is going to be very, very critical to a car. In some instances, sending a security key over a traditional wireless network is not going to be efficient or wanted. I think there are some opportunities for the satellite industry to play a critical role with respect to that area. But I will say that off the beginning, as what Tim said, it's going to be more of the industrial footprint at first. It's going to be monitoring that asset and helping the auto industry move into mobility. When you think about the Jetsons and thinking about the TV set in the car and all that, I think that's much farther off, and there are a lot of cost constraints that we're going to have to overcome that allow us to play in that.
Mobility is the nature of satellite. The highest application that is growing, and car is the new one of them. Coming to the connected car, it is today everybody needs to be connected. So outside of the city, you cannot get a very, very good cellular connectivity today. I remember going through Oregon, it's very tough to get cellular connectivity through the mountains. So it is mandatory if you want to be connected through satellite. But even more so if you are going to unmanned cars. Unmanned cars will bring a lot of traffic. Real-time traffic. They will require satellite. They need to be connected anywhere, and satellite is the only solution to address that. So in that regard, mobility absolutely is an opportunity for IoT and any other service, even consumers in SIPs or connected cockpit in aircrafts. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to segue off of that and off what Greg explained. Certainly, I think it was summarized yesterday when Mark Dankberg was talking. There's going to be a requirement for multiple technology, and part of that requirement is that the satellite industry has to minimize the size and the cost of the terminals that will be on the vehicles. I agree with both my colleagues that certainly satellite will be a part of the play. Let's face it, Sirius XM and GPS, the one-to-many solution, is where satellite is successful and brings its value. Ultimately, as Alvaro was suggesting, the autonomous vehicle is going to have multiple levels of connectivity. One is going to be for the management of the car itself and all of the details that are coming off of the car. But another is going to be, let's face it, we're going to have vehicles where the front seat will not be facing forward, it'll be facing back, and people will be facing each other, and they'll be downloading content. You're going to have huge pipes of content going to those vehicles, and that's where satellite will come into play as well. Most importantly, and I think perhaps Greg will touch on it later, is the security that's required, and touched on it a little bit already. But go ahead, Paul, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, Carnegie already plays in connected car now. We licensed our connectivity. As I said, we have a connectivity practice for core networking. We licensed it to Continental, and it's probably in, I would say, millions of cars as it stands today. The key thing that the reason it was out there and the reason we did this and Continental did this is you guys have all hit on something. How do you stay connected? Well, there's really two parts to that. As you get multiple radios, including satellite, you're going to have to make both business and operational requirement decisions on when do I change the connectivity. Secondly, that has to be seamless when you change it. And then there's a third part. So there's a seamless handoff, okay? And you can talk about that, and that kind of in your mind, it's very simple. But there's a third part. What happens when none of the links is actually good enough? The third part's aggregation, that I actually can split my content different ways to ensure some of it gets back and I get enough throughput to handle what I'm doing, right? Connected car, for some of these very reasons, a lot of it will be autonomous, but I think we can all agree that everyone said here, it's going to be super important, is the download and security of that software, and that nobody can do what you saw about 2 years ago. Someone showed how they hacked OnStar and took over the driving of a car. I don't know if any of you guys saw that, but it was a car out there, it was a commercial car, and they fixed the patch very quickly. But that should have been an alert to everybody about how important security will be for this. And I do agree with everybody. There will be a part of this as we get the price point where satellite will be there always, if for nothing else, the backup when everything else fails, okay? And the thing, though, is as an industry, for that dream to happen, I'll agree with everybody who's said it. We've got to make the end terminals and the service simple and cost effective. And there's a few years of work on that for all of us sitting up here.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so we've touched a bit on enterprise and the fact that in that market, it's entrenched with MNOs and telcos. They've got strong relationships with that entire arena, and yet it's really important. Going forward, IoT is going to be core to their competitive advantage and operational efficiency, and connectivity to the corporate network will be paramount. So let's talk about the business relationships, that innovative new forms of business relationships that we need to form as a satellite industry with players that are already in that market. And maybe, Tim, can you kick off that discussion?
Yeah, we've had mixed experience in terms of sort of penetrating larger enterprise IoT business. I can't remember, somebody touched on it. You know, larger, particularly telecom and IT services organizations, generally speaking, have far more resources than we do. And they have far more resources focused on those individual businesses. So on the one hand, it can be attractive to partner up with these companies to say, hey, I'll ride on your coattails and get my piece of that pie in your larger deal. The challenge is they're just beasts of companies to work with in most cases. Paul can probably attest to that with AT&T. I know it's been a long, hard road to develop business there together. So we found some that work in some industries where they've sort of seen the value and focused quite quickly on where we can play. We've seen others where they just do not understand the value that we bring, or there is just not a realization of what satellite can do. We've had far more success, in fact, over the last 5 years, simply targeting those enterprises directly. But that comes at a price. You have to dedicate people, you have to believe that what you can offer can really be of value there. You know, we built our business with a heavy equipment industry really from scratch in the last 5 years, but we've now got, you know, most of the market for new satellite embedded telematics in heavy equipment. So it's a really challenging thing to do, is to penetrate those enterprises with, you know, small scale, limited resources, and sometimes not speaking the same language.
There is, again?
Go ahead.
There is a challenge that you just mentioned. That is the language that we speak. We are satellite guys. We come to a conference, everybody is satellite guy. We talk to satellite language, which is not telco language. So one of the challenges that we have is that our customers sometimes don't understand satellite. So, or we explain it very basic, or we speak the same language. So this is something that why satellite needs to be easier, because otherwise the channels won't address our market. So they will address with different technologies because they don't understand satellite. So that's something that we need to simplify for them. We need to speak their language, and we will address that market. We usually work through partners, always, because for us it's extremely good, but we need to, understand each other.
That's a great
I-
point. And, can I just throw something in there? Because I had an experience a couple of weeks ago at Modern Day Marine and was visiting a number of satellite companies, and two companies, one operator, one system integrator, made the point that they speak satellite and cellular. And that is a sea change. That is I've never heard that before. So yeah, I think it's interesting. You're right. There's some evolution happening here.
Yeah, I could certainly attest to that. As Tim referenced, the AT&T relationship that we've got. Every 6 months, we do a satellite training class for their salespeople. Inevitably, what do they say? You have to hear something 7 times before you learn it. So I'm up to the 7th time soon. So we'll see if they learn it. But the interesting thing is my team has to support all of the solutions that the AT&T salespeople want to put forth. And the first thing that happens is they don't refer to the training class, they call us. And a big company, thousands of salespeople, they keep us busy, that's for sure. But I think big part of it is training. Big part of it is know their language as well. Globecomm does have a subject matter cellular team, so we're working hand in hand with them and really just show them the benefits, that it's really just connectivity like they work with. That's how we've gotten through to them.
And Globecomm was one of those two companies.
Just to finish up on something too, it's absolutely imperative that if we want to interconnect at a network layer with the traditional wireless players, then it's going to be much easier for us to open up APIs and to integrate into their systems versus them having to integrate into a satellite language. And I remember back when I was working with Tim, that was always a major concern of working with the big telcos or even the big systems integrators. It was so difficult to look at our air interfaces, the APIs we had. They'd have to write special code and software, and it just got so cumbersome for them to again pick up maybe what was 5 or 10% of assets that they wanted to connect. That cost was just too much for them. They weren't going to do that. I think just the basis of some of the things you've heard at this conference too, with software-defined networks, there are technologies that are coming along too that'll be integrated into the satellite industry, I think, much quicker. I think when you look at our asset base and it has a 15 or a 20-year time period that it's put up in space, that does render it difficult for us as an industry to, in some way, shape, or form, change our networks quickly to adhere to the changes that are happening on the ground. So I think the advent of software-defined networks and some of that technology will also assist with this, but it will be imperative for us to, if we want to get into a larger marketplace, we need to start acting and talking that language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to wrap up what everyone has said, first of all, a lot of our customers don't even understand cellular. To be honest with you, they understand cellular through their cell phone, but that's the radio technology itself. Almost no customers really, your end customers, really understand any type of radio or satellite at all, how it works. They just like that it works. So the thing that I spend a lot of time with our executive team and with our customers looking at is like, we're hitting price points, we're getting certain pieces of technology, and it's kind of like, now you can. Now you can actually hit this problem. But the only way you can address it with that people and go to market with it is, it's got to be turnkey. It literally has to be so simply done. All the interfaces, analytics, alerts to your cell phone, to your email, to your text, all these things done. They don't have to think of anything. They scan a barcode. They turn on the last piece of connectivity. And depending on what happens, maybe some light professional installation, and it just works. And the configuration is simple. And this whole sort of out-of-box pop-up network, get it all together, and it solves their problem without like everyone having to have 15 PhD scientists. That is part of any success in this market. If it takes 10 months and who knows how many people to put together something that should be pretty simple, you've already failed because you've already lost it on the cost of just engineering time. So I would tell everybody, every time you approach this market, it's really great to start thinking about the verticals that I just hit a great technology and price point. how do I hit 90% of that with some sort of a turnkey solution? And that sells itself. That's something to think about. Solve that end user's problem. Don't talk about your technology. Our satellite technology is a tool in a toolbox of things that ends up solving a real person's real problem so they can make real money. And as long as we keep that in front of us, a lot of success.
The user experience.
I love it what you mentioned. One of the main challenges of satellite is the activation. So it is it is not like an iPhone. You get the iPhone, and first time you register, it just turn on. Satellite is not like that. So we need to make satellite as an iPhone.
You can do that with Iridium, actually. You can go into any REI in this country, buy a Garmin device, you can activate it from the device or from the web. So we sort of cracked it. I mean, we haven't certainly solved all of the challenges there are, and I would totally agree that having a very proprietary technology creates lots of barriers. But it's a constant battle, as Greg said earlier, trying to make your stuff look and feel more mainstream in an industry that isn't so mainstream is really one of the biggest challenges.
So, Tim, putting you on the spot,
Gosh.
how did you just do this with Amazon?
Yeah, so some of you may have seen, we announced a relationship with Amazon a couple of weeks ago, and that's really in the same theme of making satellite and satellite IoT easier to adopt. I can tell you that 95% of the companies developing IoT solutions today are developing in the cloud. That's probably not news to a lot of people. But most of our organizations, satellite operators and companies that support them, a lot of them are sort of dealing with either, a combination of proprietary technologies, different ways of interfacing, and it's not necessarily that easy to connect the dots for people. So, we sort of, through conversation, realized that we had sort of a bit of a shared vision with Amazon, which is that, they wanted a way to connect the 80% of the world that doesn't have reliable connectivity, and we wanted to be able to provide our customers with a simpler, easier way of adopting IoT solutions through Iridium. So we're connecting our network to their core IoT platform in a way that means, you literally be able to drag and drop a widget from left to right, and that will give you connectivity onto the network. A lot of work under the hood to get that done, but that's really why we did it.
Great. We have 2 minutes. Everybody will go down the line, and final comments you want to make about the future of IoT and our role as satellite players. You just spoke, so.
Well, I'll take it from a little bit of a different approach too, because as we've been talking about, looking out and going after these marketplaces, we also have to look internally, and I see a lot of times inside our own organizations that moving from traditional satellite speak, and that comes all the way through from the engineers to the people that launch rockets to the way they build satellites. There's a culture that takes time to change also. So internally, and with that culture is also an investment of these assets that we do put into space, and getting a return on those assets in a IoT environment where there are lots of things that are paying small ARPUs is challenging unto itself. So as much as we've been talking about these big marketplaces, there are some realities that we also have to think about internally with respect to how our organizations are structured and the asset base that we have to play with, and also what the investment criteria and the ROI looks like from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with you in making it all work at the price we've been hammering it as a group. Is the future of satellite and IoT? Our company was founded on those two as principal bets. We totally believe in it, and we've got the business cases and everything to back it up. And as do every member here on this panel, has different business cases based on the technology they have. I think it's bright. It's going to grow. It's going to be fantastic. All of us who are on this panel are lucky to kind of be in that part of the business, because it's going to continue to propel our companies forward, and it's going to solve a lot of really hard problems and great problems and better businesses and people's lives. So it's kind of nice to be doing something along those lines. So it's a great place to be, and it's going to be greater over the next 10 years, 20 years.
My remark is make it simple and they will buy it. So speak the same language, and connectivity is mandatory for everybody and everything. So.
I think one thing we didn't touch on, and Catherine mentioned I had many titles, not all listed here, but one of them is sales. And in order to have a successful IoT business, you have to be able to show your customers a return on investment on the IoT platform that you're going to develop and implement and run as a managed service, as the case may be. So it's ultimately selling not only to the technical people, selling to the CFO of a company and showing them the return on investment of the platform that you're about to implement, working with them on their business models and showing them how you can either save money or make more money.
It's terrific. I will throw in one final remark in that I was at a carrier/enterprise conference in Budapest a couple weeks ago, and there was a comment made by one of the enterprise customers saying that in that world, there is no such thing as a forklift upgrade. Their entire infrastructure is patched together, legacy systems and new systems being layered in, and the explosion of innovation happening in their sphere makes their world really complex. Satellite is complex, and to your point about simplification, we absolutely have to make it simple and easy for them to take up our capability. So thank you, everybody, very much, and thank you.
Thank you.